Is it possible to make horror without anything scary? Yeah, obviously it is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm the first person to answer that question. There have been web series, video games, films, books, and TV shows all built off of the idea of scaring the audience without actually doing anything that scary. Scary things that shock you, like jump scares, gore, killing, or practically anything done to abruptly give the audience a rush of adrenaline. All of them are lost when we turn to face things like ambience, psychological horror, cosmic horror, existential dread, all that funky stuff. And personally, I love this form of horror. Not only is it way better to talk about on the channel because there's only so much digging you can do into a burst of energy, but I find it way more impressive and engaging when something is able to creep the terror onto you without you even realizing. And this is where Exit 8 comes into play. Late last year, I was a bit stumped on video ideas and decided to do something I hadn't done before and buy a game for the express purpose of making a video on it. I decided on Exit 8 because it sounded very interesting and something right up my alley. Once I actually got a hold of it, I felt I couldn't say enough about it to justify a full video on it. But now I've changed my mind for two reasons. A, I appreciate the way that it functions and its concept a lot more than I did 8 months ago, and B, with the release of Deltarune in 2 weeks as of writing this, I need to get a little something out in between hyperventilating and theorizing. Also, in case my voice sounds a bit off, I just have a bit of a cold, don't worry about it. So without further ado, get your ticket, note the anomalies, and let's get straight into analysing it. Exit 8 has a very simple gameplay loop and not a whole lot of lore. For those of you who don't know, in Exit 8 you start off by walking into a hallway. If the hallway is normal, then you're supposed to walk right through. If the hallway has an anomaly, then you're supposed to walk back. You start off at Exit 0, and if you do what you're supposed to, you go on to Exit 1. You do this over and over Exit 2, 3, 4, but if you mess up once, then it's right back to Exit 0. And that's essentially the whole game. The rest of it is left up to you to figure out what's normal, what isn't, and whether you can trust your own judgment. Before diving into the game itself, I'd like to touch on how the game introduces the concept onto you. You get one side that tells you how to play the game. It gives you all the rules you need, but leaves out one very important piece of information. What are the anomalies? Sure, from the sentence you'll be able to infer that there'll be something wrong with the corridor, but for your first couple of times through the tunnel, you won't know which aspects are anomalies or what you should be looking for in an anomaly. At the beginning, all you know about anomalies is that there's something different. That could be anything from a scary monster appearing right next to you, to the posters looking different, to the lettering being rearranged. And so for the next 5 or 10 rotations, you'll be compulsively checking every single detail, not knowing whether it can even be an anomaly or not. It gets you right into the headspace of someone who's stuck down here. It forces you to get invested in the world, because unless you start thinking afraid, you won't win. Another example in the same vein of this is how the game tells you whether you made the right decision or not. For reference, if you walk through a hallway with an anomaly or walk back through one without, the only way that you can tell is by seeing which exit you end up on. If you're at exit 0, then you made the wrong choice. This adds a certain level of confusion and problem solving to the start of the game, which adds to the isolating and almost introspective nature of it. But that's just the introduction. How about the actual gameplay loop itself? Exit 8 works so well as a horror game because its one and only goal is to make you question yourself. It's like a psychological horror where the subject is your own psyche. To understand why it works so well, let's look at the concept of trust. Horror is scary because you don't know what's going to happen. Pretty much everything's scary, from masks to death to those super loud cars or motorbikes that drive past you randomly and sound like they explode and give you a mental heart attack. They all have at least one aspect where you're completely thrown off the deep end into something that you don't understand or expect. But the one thing that can negate that is trust, believing that something or someone else can save you no matter what happens. The main difference between an action movie and a serial killer movie is the dashing hero who has everything under control. Knowing this, it's easy to understand why a lot of horror games try to limit your trust as much as possible. They'll try to keep you isolated, they'll limit the number of safe spots, they'll put in betrayals or twists that recontextualize your trust. But the aspect of trust that we'll focus on for today is trusting yourself. A lot of the time this one can be forgotten and pushed to the side, and I think that makes sense. Making the audience not even trust themselves requires some pretty intense and well-constructed story/gameplay beats, a lot of concepts even having to be somewhat tailored to each individual person, which is obviously off the table. However, making you lose trust in yourself is the main reason why I chose to make a video on Exit 8. The whole game is designed in such a way that you have to question yourself at any and every point just to win. This is done in a bunch of ways. For me, the best example is when you get something wrong. The game makes it so there is a lot of room in between the hallway itself and the sign that tells you whether you're right or wrong. This means that you need to be really sure of your choice before going down, otherwise you'll turn back. So when you lead yourself down the wrong path and it takes you right back to exit 0, you lose trust in yourself. For the next few rotations, you're not going to fully trust your idea of what is and isn't an anomaly, which leads to more failure and so on and so forth. This works as horror, not only because of the fear you have in not trusting yourself, but because of how real it feels. The anomalies in this game on their own aren't exactly nightmare material, so adding this extra layer makes you forget about the game and just worry about yourself. There's also the horror that comes in forgetting something or not knowing for sure whether or not something is an anomaly. For a good portion of the game, you won't know every single detail in the room, nor will you be able to tell for sure whether something is or isn't an anomaly. Yeah, sure, some of them are pretty obvious, but others are literally different flooring patterns. So a lot of your time will be spent staring at a no cigarettes poster, desperately trying to remember if it had that colouring before or not, or looking up at the stain on the ceiling and trying to figure out if it wants to hurt you. Like I've said before, it puts you in the headspace of someone who's been paranoid for a while. Speaking of paranoia, another way this game makes you feel like this is how they use the umbrella term of anomalies. In this game, a misplaced door handle and a flood in the tunnels hold the exact same level of danger. Suddenly, some of the more intrusive threats seem borderline inconsequential since you can always just head back, and small shifts can fill you with joy and terror at the same time. You have to change your perception of what is and isn't scary for the purposes of this game, which once again builds up that idea of you not being able to trust your own perception. One of the more ambient things that adds to this is how quiet and repetitive everything is. Obviously, this game wants you to spend as much time in your head as possible, so making it so there are little to no new stimuli is a great way of doing this, alongside being great for tension and whatnot. Through the entirety of the game, there's this soft static white noise playing in the background which does this, alongside the rhythm of your steps, the fact that this guy walks the same route at the same time each rotation. It really gives you nothing to distract yourself from the tension. That is, of course, until it breaks with an anomaly that comes crashing down on you. So that's why I'd say the game works so well conceptually. Now I want to point out some of my favourite anomalies or other specifics. First on the agenda is this guy. He appears in every single rotation, walking at the same place, doing the same thing and being invincible as ever. That invincible thing was a funny comment, but it's also part of the reason I like his inclusion. The game doesn't really try to pretend that this guy is a normal person. He survives the flood that comes in, he doesn't seem to notice the blackouts, and the wallflower doesn't attack him. This is really great for a couple of reasons. First off, it adds to the cold, calculating nature of the game. At the start, you probably see him as proof that you're in some kind of a time loop, but by the end, you don't really think of him as much more than any of the other objects in the room. It's a nice test of how far down the pipeline of this game you are. This guy is also so great because he sets up a false sense of security. Let's go back to that concept I mentioned before, trust. Because you understand so little about the tunnel, at the start you're probably going to find a bit of trust in this guy. He does seem to be the only part that's like you after all, but then you'll get your first anomaly with him. Could be the one where he runs at you, where he smiles at you, where he stares at you, doesn't really matter. What matters is that for every cycle after that point, you'll be compulsively checking every detail about him. I'd say it gets the vibe of the game across really well. Alongside this, the other thing that I generally enjoy about the anomalies is the fact that they're unnerving but not actively trying to be scary. There aren't any really in-your-face jump scares, the majority of the anomalies aren't scary faces, and they actively try to hide themselves. This helps them feel more real, yes, but also makes the game itself more unique. It's great to have a horror game that almost doesn't seem to realize that it's scary, and I can't think of any that are that way quite like this one. Also, it makes it way more accessible for more jumpy people, so that's always great. Obviously, I'm not going to do a ranking of each anomaly, I'm not that deranged, but I'd say my favourites are the Running Man, Blackout, Turned On Security Camera, and Face Tiles. These ones either broke the tension that was being built really satisfyingly, or subtle enough that they felt like a revelation to find out. I remember the first time I noticed the face tiles. I had to really take a leap of faith because I genuinely couldn't remember if they were like that before, so great stuff. The only weak ones for me were probably the growing posters of the moving sign, because they seem pretty low quality for a game by these standards, and for the growing posters, a little unfair. But that's about all I have to say. Basically what I'm trying to say with this video is that Exit 8 is a very clever horror game, and it's worth playing. The only drawback is that it can get boring to play for long periods of time, something you'll probably have to do considering that it's decently difficult, but overall it's really interesting and not something that you see every day. Also, I didn't even notice this until halfway into writing my speech, but they actually made a movie of this game. It was just released a couple of weeks ago as of making this video, and it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. While unavailable for where I live now, I'll definitely get a look at it if I can. But with that, I'm going to end the video. Now back to mentally screaming about the release of Deltarune again. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, you're a real one, unlike this guy. So with that out of the way, keep your eyes peeled, get your legs ready to run, and cue the outro music.